My name is Rita Doyle, and at 71 my son-in-law stood up at the head of his own dinner table and told a room full of people that I lived in his house out of charity. His house. The one with my name on the deed. Grant smiled when he said it. He even lifted his glass a little, like generosity was something a man could toast to. Everyone at that table nodded along. Except me. I picked up my fork. I finished my chicken. And when the plates were cleared, I told him it was a lovely dinner. Here's the thing nobody at that table knew. Whose house was whose? By the time I got home that night, I'd already made the phone call I'd been putting off for 2 years. By morning, there would be a sign in that yard, and it wasn't going to say what Grant thought it would say. If you've ever fed the very people who forgot who set the table, you're exactly who I made this for. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe before the polite part of this story runs out. Let me tell you who I am first, so the rest of it lands the way it should. For 38 years I ran a diner on Route 9 in Millbrook called Rita's Kitchen. Eggs at dawn, meatloaf by noon, pie all day. I opened the register every morning at 5:40 and I closed it myself every night, and in between I fed half that town whether they could pay that week or not. Frank was my husband. We ran the counter together for 19 years, him on the grill, me on the books, until his heart gave out on a Tuesday morning while he was flipping pancakes for the breakfast rush. I was 45. Dana was 20 and away at college. I finished the shift that day because there were 40 people sitting at my counter and nowhere else for their eggs to come from. That's not a complaint. That's just what happened. I ran that diner alone for the next 26 years. I never remarried. I never sold on a bad year, even when there were plenty of them. I kept Frank's life insurance in a savings account I never touched, and every dollar the diner turned a profit, I put somewhere quiet where it could grow. People assume a woman who spent 4 decades behind a counter doesn't understand money. I understand money better than most people understand their own children. 8 years ago, my niece told me it was time, and I sold the diner to a young couple who still keep the pie case the way I taught them. Between that money and Frank's insurance and 30-some years of a life spent not wasting anything, I paid cash for a house on Sycamore Lane 5 years ago. Craftsman style, wraparound porch, good bones. I paid it off in a single afternoon at the title company, no mortgage, no bank, no one's name on that deed but mine. Behind the main house there was an old carriage house, more of a garage with a loft, really. I had it converted into a small one-bedroom the same year I bought the property. People asked me why a woman living alone needed a second unit. I told them the truth. I built it so I'd never be anyone's burden. A place I could age into on my own terms, with my own key, without asking permission from a soul. I did not build it so my son-in-law could stand in my house and call it his charity. 2 years ago, Dana called me crying. Her landlord had sold the condo out from under her and Grant with 60 days' notice, and rents in Millbrook had gone up faster than Grant's paychecks. I didn't think twice. Take the main house, I told her. I'll move into the carriage house out back. It's smaller, it's quieter, and frankly, at my age, I'd rather not be climbing 2 flights of stairs every morning anyway. I never asked them for rent. I only ever asked that they cover the utilities on their side, which some months they managed and some months they didn't, and I never once brought it up. I kept paying the property taxes. I kept paying the homeowner's insurance. I kept the roof, the furnace, the water heater, all of it, in my name, out of my account, the way it had been since the day I bought the place. Grant never asked whose name was on any of it. He just started telling people it was his. Not directly, not at first. It came out sideways, the way these things always do. He'd tell his buddies at the marina, "We've got Dana's mom set up out back, we take care of her." He told our mailman once that he was renting out the guest house to a nice old lady. He told his own mother, at Easter, that he and Dana had made room for me, like I was a guest who'd overstayed a weekend and they were being gracious about it. I let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth the argument. I told myself Dana had enough on her plate. That was my mistake. not weakness. I trusted silence to do a job that only words can do. There were smaller moments too, the kind you don't notice piling up until you finally stop to count them. Grant borrowed my lawnmower for 2 summers straight without once asking, just wheeled it out of my little shed on Saturday mornings and wheeled it back Sunday night, empty of gas. He stopped knocking on the carriage house door sometime in the first few months, the way you stop knocking on a room you've decided belongs to the help. At a 4th of July barbecue last year, I heard him introduce me to a neighbor's cousin as our tenant out back, and laugh like it was a joke we were both in on. I wasn't in on it. I refilled my own gas can after that barbecue, quietly, and I didn't say a word about the word tenant, though I turned it over in my mind more nights than I'd like to admit. A woman doesn't rent from herself. But I told myself, again, that it wasn't worth the fight. I'd buried a husband and raised a daughter alone and run a full house on my own 2 feet for decades. I thought I could absorb one more small unkindness without it costing me anything. I was wrong about that too. It was costing me every single time. I simply hadn't started keeping a ledger yet. Grant, meanwhile, had bigger plans than a boat dock. He'd started a business 2 years back called Pruitt River Adventures, kayak rentals and pontoon tours out of the marina, and it had never quite turned the corner he kept promising it would. He'd taken out an equipment loan he was behind on. He'd leased 2 more pontoons he didn't need yet. And for the better part of a year, he'd been courting a local businessman named Chip Halloran to invest $150,000 for a quarter of the company. Chip liked Grant. Chip also liked stability, the kind you can see with your own eyes. And Grant, without ever quite saying it in so many words, had let Chip believe that the Pruitt family owned their home outright, free and clear, no debt, a paid-off house as proof that Grant Pruitt was a man who finished what he started. He wasn't lying about the house being paid off. He was lying about whose name was on it. My granddaughter Nora lived in the main house too. Dana's daughter from her first marriage, 22 now, working as a vet tech across town, the only one under that roof who ever knocked before she walked into my carriage house. Nora noticed things. She always had, since she was small enough to sit on my diner's counter stools and watch me work the register. I didn't know yet how much she'd already started noticing. If you've ever been the one who quietly paid for a kindness everyone else took credit for, leave one word in the comments. I read every single one. The dinner was Grant's idea, which should have told me something on its own. Grant does not host. Grant attends, loudly, and lets other people handle the details. But this one mattered to him. Chip Halloran was finally coming to sign, or close to it, over dinner at the house, and Grant wanted the whole family there. Dana's aunt and uncle. A couple of neighbors. Nora. Me, in the kitchen since Saturday morning, because somehow, 2 years in, Sunday dinner had quietly become mine to cook whether anyone asked or not. I made a roast chicken, the kind Frank used to request every year for his birthday. I made the green beans with the bacon the way Dana liked as a girl. I set the table myself because Grant had already moved on to setting up the good scotch for Chip. Chip arrived in a blazer that cost more than my first car. His wife brought a bottle of wine and complimented my centerpiece, not knowing I'd grown the dahlias in it myself, out back, by the carriage house. Dana's Aunt Pauline and Uncle Marv came in right behind them, along with the Hendersons from 2 doors down, who Grant had invited mostly, I think, so the table would look fuller for Chip. Nora arrived last, straight from a shift, still smelling faintly of the clinic, and took the seat beside me without anyone asking her to. Dinner went the way these dinners go. Compliments on the chicken. Grant refilling Chip's glass a little too eagerly. Talk of pontoons and margins and a marina expansion that existed, at that point, mostly on paper. Then Grant stood up to make a toast. He talked about family. He talked about hard work. He talked about how a man builds something real by surrounding himself with people who believe in him. Then he gestured out the back window, toward the little lit-up windows of the carriage house, toward the home I had paid for with 38 years of eggs and pie and a husband's insurance money I never touched. And that's Dana's mom's place, out back, he said, smiling at Chip like he was letting him in on a secret. She doesn't have much left after the diner closed, but we take care of her. Family's family. We let her live here out of our charity, and honestly, we're happy to do it." The table laughed, warm and easy, the way people laugh when they think they've just watched something generous happen. Chip Halloran raised his glass to Grant. I sat there with my fork in my hand. Charity. It's a strange word to hear applied to your own front door. I want you to understand something, because it matters for everything that comes after. I wasn't angry in that moment, not the loud kind of angry. I was accurate. I ran the numbers in my head the way I used to run a Friday night ticket. Property taxes, $6,400 a year, paid by me. Insurance, paid by me. The roof I'd replaced 2 winters ago, paid by me. The house itself, $375,000, paid in a single afternoon, by me. And across the table, a man who had never once asked whose name was on any of it had just told an investor he was doing me a favor. I finished my chicken. I did not correct him. Not at that table, not in front of Chip Halloran, not with Dana's face already tight the way it gets when she senses a storm and starts praying it passes quietly. When the plates were cleared, I stood, folded my napkin, and looked at my son-in-law. "Thank you for a lovely dinner, Grant," I said. He beamed. He thought he'd been gracious. He thought the evening had gone exactly the way he'd planned it. I said my goodnights. I hugged Nora a little longer than usual. I walked the short path from the back porch to my own front door, past the dahlias I'd grown, past the little brass numbers on the carriage house that read 114B, and I let myself into the home Grant had just given away in a toast that wasn't his to give. I didn't cry. I didn't slam a single door. I sat down at my kitchen table, the small one Frank and I bought secondhand 40 years ago, and I picked up my phone. I called Denise Okafor. Denise used to come into my diner every Thursday for 30 years, tuna melt, black coffee, and now she sold real estate for a living and had been asking me, gently, on and off for months, whether I'd ever thought about listing. "Rita," she said when she picked up, surprised at the hour. "Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I told her. "I'd like to list the Sycamore house. As soon as you can get the paperwork over." There was a pause on the line, the kind Denise gives you when she already suspects the real story and knows better than to ask for it yet. "I can have the listing agreement to you tonight," she said. "You sure?" I looked out my kitchen window at the lit-up main house, at the shadows of my family still laughing around a table I'd set. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. She emailed the papers within the hour. I read every line twice, the way I've read every important document of my life, and at 10:40 that night, alone in the home my son-in-law had just called his own generosity, I signed my name to sell it. If you've ever been the built-in babysitter, the built-in landlord, and the built-in punchline dressed up as one big happy family, you already know exactly what that pen felt like in my hand. Stay with me, because what I found in the days after I signed those papers was worse than one careless toast. Subscribe now, so the rest of this finds you. I want to be honest about something. That toast wasn't really the beginning. It was only the moment I stopped pretending I hadn't noticed the rest. For months before that dinner, small things had been landing on my desk the way loose change lands in a diner till, one coin at a time, until you look down and realize you're holding real money. In March, Grant had asked me, almost offhand while helping himself to my coffee without asking, hypothetically, if anything ever happened to you, the house would just go to Dana automatically, right? Since we live here? I told him hypothetically, nothing happens automatically. Deeds don't work off feelings. He'd laughed it off. Just curious, he said. Estate planning and all that. In April, a glossy flyer came addressed to the Pruitt family, 114 Sycamore Lane, from an outfit called Sterling Capital Partners, offering to help homeowners unlock rental income from underutilized secondary units. Someone had circled the carriage house photo on the sample brochure inside in blue pen. It wasn't my handwriting. In June, Nora showed up at my door on her lunch break, still in her scrubs, looking like she'd rehearsed what she was about to say the whole drive over. Grandma, she said, I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to make it sound less bad than it is. I put the kettle on. I let her sit. I was looking for tape in Grant's desk on Tuesday, she said. For a graduation card. And there was a folder. Printed stuff. A blank form called a quitclaim deed, with your name already typed in as the person giving up the property, and Mom and Grant's names typed in as the people receiving it. There was a sticky note on top. Her voice caught. It said, "Run this by Dana's cousin the paralegal. Frame it as protecting the house from nursing home costs before anything happens." I sat very still. A quitclaim deed. A signature line waiting for mine. I want to explain, for anyone who hasn't run into this before, exactly what that piece of paper does. It doesn't ask a bank for anything. It doesn't require a judge. It only requires one signature, freely given, and the house changes hands forever, no questions asked afterward about whether the person signing understood what they were losing. Someone had already typed in the names. Someone had already written themselves a script for how to bring it up gently. Nobody had asked me a single honest question. "There's more," Nora said. "I heard him on the phone with Chip last month. He said, and I'm quoting him exactly because it stuck with me, the house is paid off, it's basically ours, my mother-in-law's just out back, she's getting older, it'll simplify itself soon enough. It'll simplify itself." As if I were a line item Grant expected time to erase for him. I thanked Nora. I told her she'd done exactly the right thing, and I meant it. Then, after she left for her shift, I did what I do best. I went and checked the paper trail myself, because feelings tell you what to be afraid of, but documents tell you what's actually true. I drove to the county recorder's office the next morning and pulled a fresh copy of the deed to 114 Sycamore Lane. Grantee, Rita M. Doyle, sole owner. No transfers. No quitclaims filed. No second name ever added, not once in 5 years. I pulled my tax records. $6,412 a year, paid from my account, every single cycle, for 5 years running. I called my insurance agent to confirm the homeowner's policy. My name. My signature. My premium, auto-drafted from an account Grant Pruitt had never once contributed a dollar to. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. Clean. Untouched. Mine. But now I understood the shape of what had been quietly building around it. Someone had been trying to draft the future of my own house without ever once including me in the sentence. There was one more piece, and Denise was the one who handed it to me, without either of us realizing at first what it meant. She mentioned, almost in passing over coffee, that a residential appraiser named Colin Ashford had called her office in late June asking informal questions about comparable sales on Sycamore Lane, for a client doing some financial planning. Denise hadn't thought much of it at the time. Appraisers call around all the time. I asked her, just to be sure, whether she still had the caller's number. She did. I recognized the callback prefix immediately. It matched a business card I'd once seen clipped to the visor of Chip Halloran's truck. Grant hadn't only been telling Chip a story. He'd had someone quietly price the house for him, the same way you'd price a boat before you tried to borrow against it. He wasn't simply hoping the truth would simplify itself someday. He was actively building a number to show an investor, using a house that had never once had his name on it. I made one more call, to a friend from my diner days who now worked the counter at the county assessor's office. I asked her, carefully, if anyone had come in recently asking questions about the Sycamore Lane property. "Funny you ask," she said. "A man came in back in May asking about transfer on death deeds and homestead exemption transfers. Didn't give his name at first, but I recognized him. Grant, Dana's husband. Said he was just curious for the future." Curious. That word again, the same one Grant had used with me in March, dressed up nice and casual so it wouldn't sound like what it actually was, which was reconnaissance. I drove home that afternoon and sat in my little kitchen a long while. I thought about the marina too, because a fact this important rarely travels alone. I'd overheard enough at that dinner, and confirmed enough since, to piece the rest together. Grant was behind on his equipment loan. 2 pontoons he'd leased were sitting unused most weeks. The marina had sent him a final notice on his dock fees, 90 days past due, threatening to repossess his lease slip if he didn't pay by the end of the month. Chip Halloran's $150,000 wasn't an investment in Grant's dream anymore. It was a rescue boat for a business that was already taking on water, and Grant needed Chip to believe the Pruitt family stood on solid, mortgage-free ground to climb aboard. He'd been telling a rich man a story about a house that was never his, to solve a problem that was entirely his own making. And somewhere in a desk drawer 40 feet from where I slept every night, there was a blank form waiting for the day he decided my signature was simply the next item on his to-do list. I want to be fair, even now, about why. Desperation makes people reach for whatever's closest, and I was closest. Grant grew up watching his own father lose a small business and everything attached to it, and I think some part of him has spent his whole adult life terrified of becoming that man, terrified enough to reach for a shortcut instead of a hard conversation. Understanding that didn't make it acceptable. It just made it human. If you've ever found out someone had already written the ending to your own story without asking you a single question, comment the word paperwork, so I know you're still with me. Because what happened next didn't come from anger. It came from paper, and paper doesn't raise its voice. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how quiet justice can be. I didn't confront Grant. I didn't wave the quitclaim folder in his face or scream about charity across the dinner table. Loud proves nothing except that you're upset, and upset is exactly what people like Grant are counting on, because upset is easy to dismiss. Instead, I called Miriam Sokol, the estate attorney who'd handled Frank's affairs all those years ago and mine ever since. I want everything locked, I told her. Trust, power of attorney, healthcare directive, all of it, updated and airtight. Who do you want holding power of attorney? Miriam asked. Nora, I said. And you, as backup. Not Dana. Not Grant. The 2 people in my life who had shown up without ever once checking what was in it for them. We signed everything that week, witnessed, notarized, dated. By the time we were done, there wasn't a document left in existence that Grant could quietly walk into a room and slide across a table for my signature. Denise, meanwhile, had already listed the Sycamore property, discreetly, with private showings only, scheduled around my week, never once while Dana or Grant were home. Millbrook's a small town, and word travels, but Denise knew how to keep a listing quiet until it needed to be loud. The offer came faster than either of us expected. A young family, a nurse and a schoolteacher, cash back from selling their own starter home, full asking price, $460,000, a clean 21-day close. I signed the purchase agreement on a Thursday. 21 days. I marked the closing date on my kitchen calendar and circled it twice, the same way I used to circle a big Saturday catering order. I want you to know I never once planned to engineer some big public reveal. I wasn't building a stage. I was simply moving forward with my own life, on my own paper, the way I always had, and I understood something Grant apparently didn't. When you tell an investor your house is paid off free and clear as proof of your stability, sooner or later, if real money is actually changing hands, someone with real money runs a title search. Truth doesn't need help finding the room. It just needs you to stop blocking the door. I'll admit there was one night, about a week before the closing, when my resolve wobbled. Dana had stopped by unannounced, tired from a double shift, and fallen asleep on my carriage house sofa the way she used to fall asleep on the diner's backroom cot as a little girl waiting for me to close up. I sat there watching her sleep and thought about the rental listings I'd need to send her once the truth came out, about the look that was coming for her face, about whether I was about to break something in my own daughter that had nothing to do with Grant at all. I almost called Denise that night to ask about pulling the listing. I picked up the phone. I even opened her contact. Then I thought about the sticky note in that desk drawer. Frame it as protecting the house from nursing home costs before anything happens. I thought about how carefully someone had already planned for a version of me too confused to notice what was being taken. And I understood that pulling the listing wouldn't have protected Dana from anything. It would only have protected Grant a little longer, at my expense, the way everything had been arranged at my expense for 2 quiet years. I put the phone down. I covered Dana with the throw blanket from the back of my sofa instead, the same way I used to cover her on that diner cot, and I let her sleep. In the morning she went home to a house I'd already agreed to sell, and she never knew how close I'd come, the night before, to letting all of it slide one more time. Some kindnesses only look like weakness from the outside. From the inside, they're just a woman deciding, one more time, not to be the one who breaks first. 3 weeks later, on the Saturday before my closing, Grant called another dinner, this one meant as a celebration. Chip's attorney had finished his due diligence, the wire was set to go out Monday morning, and Grant wanted the whole family there to toast it, the same dining room, the same good scotch, the same view out the back window toward the carriage house he'd once called his charity. I almost didn't go. Then Nora called and asked me to come for her sake, so I wouldn't be alone with what I knew while everyone else sat there celebrating a lie. So I put on my good cardigan, and I went. Dinner started warm. Grant was practically glowing, refilling glasses, talking about expansion, a second marina location, a fleet twice the size by next summer. Chip's wife asked me for my green bean recipe again. Dana squeezed my hand under the table and thanked me for coming, and for one dangerous minute I let myself hope this could all still be handled quietly, later, privately, without anyone getting hurt in front of company. Then Chip's phone rang. He excused himself to the porch. Through the screen door, in the kind of voice men use when they think no one's really listening, I heard him say, "Wait, say that again." "Whose name?" He came back inside a different color than he'd left. "Grant," he said slowly, sitting back down without touching his glass, "my attorney just ran the title search. Standard procedure before we wire anything Monday." Grant's smile hadn't moved yet, but something behind his eyes already had. "The deed to this property," Chip said, "the whole property, main house and the guest house both, it's not in your name. It's not in Dana's name. It's held solely by a Rita M. Doyle." The table went quiet in a way I've only ever heard once before, the exact stillness that falls over a diner in the half-second after someone drops a full tray. "And there's more," Chip said, and I could hear it costing him something to say it out loud in front of everyone. "The property's under contract. Sale pending. Closing in 11 days. Dana's fork hit her plate. "What?" she said, looking at me, then at Grant, then back at me. "Mom?" I set down my water glass without a sound. "It's true," I said. "All of it." Grant found his voice first, the way men like Grant usually do, reaching for anger before he'd even located the facts. "This is insane. This is my house." "It's never been your house, Grant," I said, calm as I could manage. "It's never been your name on a single document tied to it. Not the deed. Not the taxes. Not the insurance. Not $1 of upkeep in 5 years. You said we take care of you," he sputtered. "Out of charity. You let everyone believe that." "I let it go because I didn't want to embarrass you at your own table," I said. "I stopped being willing to do that the night you decided embarrassing me at my own table was worth the price of a business deal." Chip looked between us, and I watched him do the math I'd already done weeks ago. "Grant," Chip said quietly, "you told me this house was paid off, free and clear, as your family's own asset. You used it as the reason I should trust you with $150,000. "I didn't lie," Grant said. "It is paid off. By someone else," Chip said. "That's not stability, Grant. That's borrowed ground, and you let me believe it was yours." Dana's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, is that true? All of it, the quitclaim thing too?" I looked at my daughter, and for a moment I saw her at 20 again, standing at Frank's funeral not understanding yet how much weight had just landed on both of us. "There's a blank quitclaim deed sitting in your husband's desk right now," I said gently, "with my name typed in as the person giving the house away, and yours and Grant's typed in as the people receiving it. Nora found it in June. I've known for over a month. Nora didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her face said enough, and Dana believed her daughter before she believed her husband, which told me everything I needed to know about who in that house had earned any trust at all. Dana's Aunt Pauline, who'd sat through the whole thing with her napkin pressed to her mouth, finally spoke up from the far end of the table. "Grant, honey, did you have someone appraise this house?" Denise mentioned an appraiser was asking around back in June. "That's not what that was," Grant said, too fast. "It's exactly what that was," I said quietly. "You had a man price my house the same summer you were drafting a form to sign it away from me." "I don't think there's a version of that story that sounds better out loud, Grant, so I'd stop trying to find one." Grant's uncle shifted in his chair, uncomfortable in the particular way people get when they realize they've spent 2 years laughing at someone else's expense. Nobody laughed now. "Charity," I said, and I let the words sit there a second before I finished. "Charity is something you give away, Grant. This house was never yours to give. Not the carriage house, not the porch, not 1 square foot of it. You told a room full of people I lived here on your goodwill, and the whole time, you were the one living on mine." Chip stood, folded his napkin with more grace than I expected from a man who'd just had $150,000 nearly walk out the door on a lie. "I'll have my attorney draft a formal withdrawal of the offer Monday morning," he said. "Grant, I wish you well. I mean that. But I can't fund a man who needed me to believe something that wasn't true just to say yes." He and his wife left quietly. No slammed door, no raised voice, just the soft click of a screen door and the sound of gravel under tires. That left the family alone with what was actually true. Grant turned on me then, the way cornered men do. "You did this on purpose. You waited until tonight." "I signed those papers 3 weeks ago, alone, the night you called me a charity case in front of a man you were trying to impress," I said. "I didn't wait for anything. Your investor did his own due diligence." "That's not a trap, Grant. That's Tuesday, for anyone telling the truth." Nora finally spoke, quiet but steady, the way I'd taught her to be when she was small and scared of a full diner on a Saturday morning. "Grandma didn't do anything to you, Grant," she said. "She fed us. She paid for the roof over your head for 2 years and let you tell people it was the other way around. The only person who did anything here is you." Nobody argued with that, because nobody could. The house had never been so quiet in 2 years. The days after that dinner were the hardest, though not for the reasons Grant would have guessed. He tried anger first. He called Miriam Sokol's office demanding to see the trust documents, and was told, politely but firmly, that he had no standing to see anything, because he'd never had any standing at all. He tried the marina next, hoping the sale might somehow free up cash for his dock fees. It didn't work that way, and by the end of the month the marina repossessed both leased pontoons. Pruitt River Adventures closed for good 3 weeks later, the equipment sold at a loss to cover what remained of the loan. Dana didn't defend him, not the way she might have 2 years earlier. She sat with me at my kitchen table one evening, the week before closing, and finally said the thing I think she'd needed to say since she was a little girl standing in a diner watching her mother count a register alone. "I let him talk about you like that for 2 years, she said, because it was easier than admitting how much trouble he was actually in." "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have corrected him the very first time." "Yes," I said. "You should have. I didn't soften it, and I didn't need to." She'd finally said the true thing out loud, and that mattered more than any apology dressed up nicer than it needed to be. Dana and Grant found a rental across town within the 11 days, smaller, well within their means, no one else's name propping up the roof over their heads. They signed that lease themselves, for the first time in 2 years standing entirely on their own ground, however narrow it turned out to be. Nora stayed in Millbrook, closer to me than ever. She still knocks before she walks into any room I'm in, which is more than her stepfather ever managed in 2 full years under my roof. She got a promotion at the vet clinic that same spring, her own set of keys and her own set of patients, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Some people finally breathe once the air around them clears out. My neighbor Harold Kessler, who'd lived at 116 Sycamore since before I moved in and had watched me haul groceries up that driveway for 5 years without ever once seeing Grant carry a bag for me, came by the week of the closing with a casserole dish and no questions asked. "Heard you sold," he said. "Heard why, too, more or less." "Millbrook Small, Rita." "It is," I said. "For what it's worth," he said, "I never once believed that boy was doing you any favors. Man doesn't cut his own mother-in-law's grass in 5 years and then call her a charity case at dinner. That's not charity. That's gall." I laughed for the first time in weeks, standing right there in my own driveway, and told him the lemon bars in that casserole dish had better be as good as he claimed. They were. Grant didn't apologize, not really, not the kind that costs a person anything. He sent one email a month after the closing, short, defensive in places, admitting he'd handled some things poorly without ever once naming which things. I read it twice, the way I read everything important, and decided it wasn't worth answering. Some apologies are just another attempt to simplify a situation without doing the harder work underneath it. The Sycamore house closed exactly 11 days later. The young nurse and schoolteacher came to the final walkthrough with a toddler who ran straight for the sunny spot by the kitchen window and refused to leave it. I handed them the keys myself, dahlias and all, and meant every word when I told them it had been a good house to live in. I used part of what the sale brought in to buy a small cottage 2 streets from where Rita's kitchen used to sit, close enough that I still walk past the old diner most mornings and wave at the young couple running the counter the way I taught them. I kept one thing from the carriage house before I handed over the keys. The little hand-lettered sign that used to hang in my diner window every night for 38 years. Open on one side. Closed on the other. I flipped it myself every evening for nearly 4 decades, and nobody ever once got to decide for me which side was showing. It hangs by my new front door now, turned to open, and I intend to be the only one who ever turns it again. Dana comes by most Sundays now, alone, and we cook together in a kitchen that's actually mine in every sense of the word. She's still married to Grant, last I heard, though he moved in with his brother for a stretch after the pontoons were repossessed, and whatever they rebuild between them is theirs to rebuild, not mine to fix. I've stopped being anyone's rescue boat. I raised her once. I'm not raising her marriage too. If there's one thing I hope you carry out of this story with you, it's this. Love doesn't need a receipt, but it also doesn't need a cover story. The moment someone starts calling your generosity their own charity, they've stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a line item they'd like to simplify away. Let them try. Then let them find out whose name is actually on the deed. If a woman's dignity isn't up for a family vote, hit subscribe so the next chapter finds you, and drop a comment below with one word for how you'd feel walking into that dinner in my shoes. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next story.